This is BC Spirits, your look at the province's burgeoning distilling culture. What's happening, BC Spirits? Welcome to another episode. Of course, I'm your host, Sean Sewell. This week, as you can tell, it's the end of dry January. There's no more dry January. I had a drier January. It's very difficult to have a dry January in my line of work, especially with Whiskey Fest here in Victoria. That was a egregious night of not dry January. A couple of events and stuff like that, so it just sort of blows up, and all of a sudden you're like, I tried very, very hard to have a drier January. But I thought, well, you know what, I've got tons of gin in the house right now because of the Fever Tree project that I'm working on. I've got a couple of new vodkas, I've got a couple of new things that I'm going to play around with. But why not kick off the first week of drinking in February with a whiskey tasting? Because you know what, I love my whiskey. I love all my spirits, I have to. So I've got a couple you can get, one that's brand new, and 4 you cannot get unless you know the distiller, and I know the distiller, and I'll show you what I got from him. So let's kick it off. Let's kick it off straight off with the Legends Wyatt. The Legends Wyatt Distilling. This is their second release. Something a little bit different about this one. It's 90% wheat, 10% rye, aged in 4 different barrels, French oak barrels. Now, why am I starting with this one? Firstly, it's going to be a nice palate cleanser. Secondly, the sort of theme of this whiskey tasting is barrel finishing. Now, I've done Shelter Point, which is a lot of barrel finishing, and I've done Okanagan Spirits, which is a lot of barrel finishing. These guys, all of the whiskeys I have in front of me right now, are all barrel finished in something different outside of being bourbon. So, 4 French barrels. Now, I don't have any information about like ex-wine barrels, ex-cognac barrels, or anything like that, but it's French oak barrels. Ooh. On the nose, it's almost like a super complex sort of beer, like a very super grainy sort of flavor profile, but there's something in the background there that I can't put my finger on. There's only 504 bottles of this. It was distilled in about this time 4 years ago, so it's just 4 years and a couple of days. Ooh, sweetness and then spicy. Ooh. And then that bold oak, that bold French oak is like ballsy as fuck. Shouldn't swear on BC Spirits, I do apologize. But yeah, like it's definitely got the legends. Like I'm going to talk about this a couple more times in this tasting. I do believe that even though we don't have necessarily terroir here in BC quite yet with BC whiskies, I do believe that each house has its own style of whiskies that they create. Not style, style's a bad word. There's a thread of the same flavor throughout. And so when you taste all the Shelter Points, there's a Shelter Point characteristic there that flows throughout all the whiskies. Same thing with Okanagan Spirits. Legends definitely 3/4 way on the palate in a finish. You can definitely tell it's Legends straight away. If you tasted the first Legends, you get it straight away. It's this little twang. And that could come from it is terroir driven to a degree. It could come from the yeast, it could come from the still, it could come from the way the barrels are aged, a whole bunch of stuff. So, great little start. There's not a lot of wheat whiskies in BC. So this is a nice, strange start too, because it's 90% wheat. So it's like a pretty heavy, intense wheat whiskey outside your single malt realm. Okay, so next up is one of my most exciting ones because I've had these for just over 2 or 3 weeks and I haven't cracked them because I've been waiting to do this episode. Obviously, I'm not going to do doing a dry January means that I'm not doing a wet episode in January for February. But I've been really excited about these ones because Dubh Glas Distilling in Oliver, Grant Stevely, who is a very good friend, this week on the podcast, I've got him as a guest, which is going to be a lot of fun. We talk about a lot of cool stuff and his dislike of gin that created one of the most favorite gins in the province. But let's kick this off. The reason why I laugh at this, because I didn't even see these vacuum packed, is that this is all he could send me. Like, these whiskies are super rare. He's starting to release now. They're all on like 3 to 4 years old. So he's starting to release. So this one is the Clan Armstrong, and this is one of his just classic single malts. So I kind of wanted to start with this one because I haven't tasted any of the whiskeys from Douglas. So like I haven't tasted any of these whiskeys. So I wanted to sort of get a baseline. Like I was talking about that one characteristic from the distillery that flows through all of them. I did it a couple of weeks ago with the Central City stuff. Should have Figured out that that was a cask sample at 68%. But good structure. You gain bright, acidic, like almost like dried orangey sort of feel to it. But then you also gain some nice, good spice and kick to it in the back end. And it's not the alcohol, it's that oak. Oak is really fantastic. Like, it's not too matchsticky oak, which you get sometimes from some whiskies in BC. It's got some really good depth to it. That's a good start, but I can see like it's got a little sweet, sort of funky fruit finish to the back palate, so I can see what Douglas is going to have in a characteristic through their whiskies throughout. Which one should I do next? The Blood Moon. So, and I should probably... Actually, no, I'm going to do Relocation first. Then the Blood Moon. I should have pre-planned this. So next up is the Relocation. So this one is finished in a port style wine barrel, because we just have tons of wine barrels in BC. Like, I think I've said before, and I'm going to say it again, I truly believe that the wine barrel is going to be BC's like claim to this is our style in BC is going to be the wine barrel. So Relocation, if you listen to the podcast this Friday, you'll understand where the story comes back about this one. But I'm not going to tell you the story because then you won't listen to the podcast, so you have to listen to the podcast. Ooh. It's good to get that alcohol content down a little bit off the Clan Armstrong. The single malt, you definitely can tell it's Douglas for sure. It's got this sort of sweet, I don't want to say melony, but it's like the sweet, tropical, fruity, orangey, like dried orange sort of feel to it, with a really good back palate of oak to it, and then you just get this beautiful kiss of sweetness of the port wine. Really tasty. But as you can see, like, this is all that Steve Lee could bring me. So it's not like I'm sitting on bottles and bottles of the Douglas special releases. Next up is the Blood Moon, which is their bottle strength at 46%. I am feeling like such a rookie, not tasting that, not seeing that first one was 64%. So the Blood Moon is red wine finished, and everybody knows my love of red wine finishing. Like, love my red wine finishing. I think my very first red wine finished Canadian whiskey was a 40 Creek Pinot Noir cask finish. There's just something about it, and I think it's just a memory that sits in the back of my head and just clicks for me all the time. You still get that beautiful, like, Douglas has definitely got a flavor profile that I really quite like a lot in a way of, like, flavor profiles and stuff like that. Like, this weeded whiskey from Wyatt and Legends is just spectacular in difference point. It's a great palate cleanser to kick off, but the red wine gives this sort of funky red wine finish to it, which I really enjoy. Man, I wish I had larger bottles of these, because these would be my like go-to evening drinks. Now, this one's the funnest one that I've got for today. Well, one of the funnest ones. It is the Godfather. I'm going to push it really close to the camera so you can see it. The Godfather. So the Godfather cocktail is, of course, Scotch and Amaretto. So the wonderful gentlemen over at Sons of Vancouver do a lot of barrel-aged Amarettos, which is weird and wonderful and awesome. Why? Because you get this. So this is an old barrel that was used to age Amaretto, and then they took that barrel and sent it over to Douglas that they aged their whiskey in. So you've basically got this fantastic cocktail sort of in a bottle with Scotch style single malt aged in Amaretto barrels. Oh, yeah, you gain that Amaretto in the finish, but it is quite amazing, because I'm always so happy and blown away when I see distilleries in BC really hold true to their base, like having a really good entry-level base whiskey, base single malt that showcases their distillery, and then just adding things to it and finishing things in it. And I just feel like it's just such a delightful thing for BC distilleries. This one is spectacular. Like, this is, you get this really, if you've ever tasted the Amaretto from Sons of Vancouver, it's not overly sweet, it's complex and quite like off dry, off sweet sort of feel to it. So you get it for sure in the finish. This would be a great Godfather, although I probably would just drink it straight. Steve Lee, keep playing around with barrel finishes. This is awesome. I really, really am enjoying these. So far, like, this has been a great tasting and a great way to get off drier January. So next up, one of the big guys. I was there. If you watched Instagram, I was there on the weekend while I was going up to the Chilliwack Fraser Valley Distillery Festival, and stopped in, grabbed a quick beer, grabbed one of these, and then beautiful facility. Oh my god! If you're ever going out towards Chilliwack and that sort of, pop into Central City in Surrey. Absolutely epic venue. Great beer selection. You get to sit and look over the distillery, drink some whiskey. It's fantastic. They also do a whole bunch of great gins, which we've tasted in the past. But I haven't really done a lot with their whiskey. I'm not sure why. I think I picked these up in December for Christmas time. And then I knew I was going to do this episode first thing in January, so I haven't really done a lot with this. So let's kick it off. The Lohin McKinnon Tequila Barrel Finished. Now, I think I talked about this in what cool stuff I got this week, which cool stuff I got this week is coming back this week, obviously, because January's over. I've always been very interested in tequila barrel finished whiskies, because it's one of those ones, it's like, tequila's very aromatic, but so does whiskey. So how does one, so when you talk about wine and whiskey, wine adds whiskey because it's heavier than the whiskey, so the whiskey picks up those flavor profiles. Tequila, I would see, is like on the same level. So what sort of flavor profiles are you picking up from a tequila barrel when it's whiskey? Because I feel like they're on the same level, and so what are they extracting? Where's their intermingledness, I suppose? Whereas you look at the rye whiskey in the French barrel, the wheat whiskey in the French barrel from Wyatt, the French barrel really gives that wheat whiskey a really heavy, bold statement. You've seen all the ones from Douglas. They're like, it's a baseline with more. So I've always been very interested in this one. On the nose, you gain distinctive Lohin McKinnon. They definitely have a house style. And it's very interesting because I feel like the whiskey and the tequila are almost in a dance. In a way that one isn't taking over the other and the other one's not beating up the other one. It's very melodic, if that makes any sense whatsoever. Sometimes, especially after this many whiskeys in this short amount of time, I get a little incoherent. It's very interesting. Like, the Lohin McKinnon's a very light, almost floral, citrusy sort of whiskey already, and the tequila just gives it this interesting, like, back nine sort of twang, which I really enjoy. This one, I would call this a lawnmower whiskey. This is something like midsummer, mowing the lawn. You get a little chocolate tone from the Lohin McKinnon, which I think Lohin McKinnon has this like interesting like cocoa tone all the way through its whiskey. And then it's this sort of bright, sort of almost like that tequila just comes through really nice. So I call this a lawnmower whiskey. Next up, I picked this up on Saturday at the distillery. The Lohin McKinnon Niagara Barrel. So, you know my love, I've told you about my love of red wine with barrel finishes. And a friend of mine reached out to me on Instagram and was like, oh, well, why are they using Niagara barrels? So they will do two barrels. They've got a regular wine barrel from the Okanagan and then VQA Niagara barrel. So it's just about using different wine from different regions and seeing how it changes it. And I think wine tannins and wine barrels, there's just something about it. For this one, in comparison to their regular wine barrel, I find this one's much more light. It almost goes a light berry, floral, dried violets sort of feel to it. So I'm curious what sort of barrel they're using on it. Whereas the other red wine barrel is definitely a bit more rounder on the berry, like heavier, like bright berry sort of feel to it. A little bit more like the Okanagan Spirits Letter Fintry or the double barrel finish from Shelter Point, that more rounded berry. This one, it's still got that beautiful chocolate tone. There's this chocolate, like cocoa, dry cocoa tone that comes through in all Lohin McKinnon products that I really, really appreciate. So that really works with that light violets and light berries. Next up, I'm definitely going to get chocolate from this one. This one is the cocoa aged. So it's been aged in barrels with cocoa, which is just absolutely mental. So it's going to be very chocolatey. But again, I think the Lohin McKinnon for a base whiskey is probably it has this chocolate tone. It's bright and citrusy on the outside, and it's just right in the middle of the palate. It's just like chocolate, and it's very, very impressive. On the nose, you just get that dry cacao. I love dry cacao. Like the cocoa husks, a big thing for me because I think I've used cocoa husks for years, making liqueurs and using them in the kitchen and so on and so forth. Cocoa husks give you like the sweet chocolate all the way through that dry cocoa nib sort of feel. Even though this one's all cocoa nibs. Oh. The whiskey still comes through, but on that finish, it's just the sweet to raw to like cocoa nib. Very, very raw chocolate flavor profile that just dries your palate out. And if you breathe out like that, you just get like chocolate bar, but like really good quality chocolate bar, like not overly sweet, it's dry, my palate's clean, but I've just got this cocoa just bouncing around my palate. So, what a way to end a dry January. Barrel finished whiskies is a big thing in BC. I think that it needs to be embraced a lot more. I know a lot of distilleries are playing around with casks, and the thing is, a lot of these casks that they're using, they're not quite sure if they're going to work out. So like there's a lot of experimentation going on, and experimentation's great, but there's a lot of failures. I'm all down to taste the failures, all the successes, but we have to keep in mind, like when distilleries experiment, the money had to come from somewhere. The barrel had to get bought, the product had to be put into it. At the end of it, after 6 months of drinking, it could not even be any good. So it can get poured in the sink. 9 times out of 10, we're lucky that some of these experiments really go well, like some of the stuff we tasted today. But guys, go out. I've tasted so much whiskey the last 12 months. Like I think I've tasted 7 whiskeys from Shelter Point, 6 whiskeys or 7 whiskeys from Okanagan Spirits. The guys at Legends put out very particular, very specific batches. Douglas, if you can get your hand on it, it's not listed on the website. You may catch it on social media like 3 days after it happens. Steve Lee is cagey as hell when it comes to all his whiskeys. When he releases some of the stuff, they sort of come out and then disappear. But please listen to the podcast this Friday. He's awesome. Lohin McKinnon's big on the experimentation side of things. They're doing some fantastic stuff. I'm really looking forward to seeing these guys like really expand their whiskey program and really put out some fantastic whiskeys. So, barrel finished whiskeys are the end of this week. I'm so stoked that I got to do this as my first episode of February. Thank you guys for BC Spirits, all the support. As you can see, I'm wearing a nice BC Spirits shirt. Please go to the swag store and pick something up. I got some great stuff there, including shoes right now. Go out and find these if you can, because some of them are rare. Enjoy BC whiskies. If you like your single malts, you're going to love this stuff. Go out and find it. So, thanks for the support, guys. Have a good week. I'll see you next week. Bye.